People often say that blood is thicker than water. It's a belief we grow up with, almost unquestioned. From childhood, we are taught that family is sacred, that no matter what happens, these are the people who stay, the ones who protect us, support us, and never let us fall. But what if the people who were supposed to protect you become the ones you need protection from? Across America, and quietly, across the world, something is happening. Not loudly, not visibly, but inside homes, behind polite conversations and family photos. Relationships are breaking in ways most people refuse to talk about. More and more adults are choosing distance over connection. They are stepping away from parents, letting go of siblings, walking out of relationships that once defined their entire identity. This is known as family estrangement. To outsiders, it's easy to judge. It looks cold, sudden, even selfish. A child who gave up, a parent who was left behind. But the truth is rarely that simple, because estrangement is almost never about a single moment. It's not one argument, one mistake, or one bad day. It's something deeper, something that builds quietly over time, until staying becomes more painful than leaving. So what really pushes someone to make that choice? Is it rebellion, or survival? In this video, we're going to unpack what's really happening beneath the surface. We'll challenge the idea that estrangement comes out of nowhere, and instead look at the slow psychological buildup behind it. We'll explore how repeated emotional wounds, unmet needs, and controlling or dismissive environments can push someone to the point where distance feels like the only form of peace left. If you've ever felt confused, hurt, or even guilty about this topic, or if someone in your life has walked away and you don't understand why, this is where things start to make sense. This isn't just about separation. This is about what leads to it. Estrangement doesn't usually begin with chaos. It begins quietly, with change. Not the kind you notice immediately, but the kind that slowly shifts how you feel in someone's presence. At first, everything appears normal. Life goes on as it always has. You show up for family dinners. You celebrate milestones. You play your role. But something underneath starts to feel different. Not broken, just heavier. These aren't dramatic moments. They're small, almost forgettable interactions. A comment that feels slightly off. A joke that cuts a little too deep. A feeling that your voice doesn't really matter. On their own, they don't seem important. But over time, they begin to stack. And slowly, they change how you experience the relationship. Psychologists often describe this as a form of accumulated emotional strain, a buildup of repeated, unresolved discomfort. It's not loud enough to call out, but not quiet enough to ignore. You start noticing patterns, boundaries that aren't respected, feelings that are dismissed, expectations that never quite match who you are, and eventually, something shifts inside you. You become more cautious, more guarded. You think before you speak. You prepare yourself before interactions. You begin editing parts of your personality, just to avoid tension. What once felt like connection starts to feel like pressure, and what you used to call normal slowly turns into something emotionally exhausting. This is the part no one sees, because from the outside, everything still looks intact. But internally, the distance has already begun. Estrangement doesn't happen when love disappears. It happens when the emotional cost of staying becomes too high. When you've tried to adjust, explain, tolerate, and nothing changes. When you've stretched yourself so far that there's nothing left to give. Before someone walks away, they've usually stayed longer than they should have. Before the silence, there were years of trying. And before the final decision, there was quiet, growing exhaustion. This is where estrangement truly begins. Not in anger, not in impulse, but in the slow realization that staying is no longer sustainable. From the outside, estrangement can look sudden, almost impulsive. Like one day, someone just had enough, and disappeared. Parents often describe it as shocking. Everything was fine. There were no signs. And to everyone else, it really does seem that way. But that perception is misleading, because what looks like a sudden break is often the result of something that has been building for years. Think of it like pressure beneath the surface. When a volcano erupts, it feels immediate, violent, unexpected, but the eruption isn't the beginning. It's the end of a long, invisible process. Heat gathers, pressure rises, layers shift deep beneath the ground, unseen, unnoticed. Until one day, the system can't contain it anymore. Family estrangement follows that same pattern. The final argument, the uncomfortable holiday, the one comment that crosses a line. Those moments are not the cause. They are the release. They are simply where everything that was held in for years finally finds its way out. To a parent, it can feel like, "You left me because of this one moment." But from the other side, the reality sounds very different. "I didn't leave because of this. I left because this has been happening my whole life." The break feels sudden, only because the pain was never visible. Estrangement isn't a reaction to one event. It's the result of accumulated experience. Threshold that, once crossed, cannot be reversed. And once that internal limit is reached, there is no going back to how things were. Long before distance is ever created, many people have already been living inside roles they never consciously chose. In certain family systems, especially dysfunctional or emotionally imbalanced ones, identity isn't something a child discovers. It's something they are given. And those roles quietly shape how they see themselves, and how they believe love works. There's often the golden child, the one who reflects the family's ideal image. They are praised, protected, sometimes even elevated. But only as long as they continue to meet expectations. Their worth becomes tied to performance, not authenticity. Then there's the scapegoat, the one who absorbs the tension no one wants to face, the one blamed for problems they didn't create. Often, this is the person who sees things clearly, who questions, who feels deeply, who refuses to pretend. And ironically, that awareness makes them the most threatening. Because in a system built on denial, truth becomes a problem. There are others too. The invisible child, who learns early on that being unnoticed is safer than being seen. They don't ask for much. They don't take up space. They survive by staying quiet. But over time, that silence turns inward. Into doubt, into hesitation, into the feeling that their presence doesn't matter. And then there's the parentified child, perhaps the most burdened of all, the one who becomes emotionally responsible for everyone else. The mediator, the stabilizer, the one who grows up too early. They learn that love is something you earn, by fixing, by giving, by carrying what was never yours to carry. But here's the truth. None of these roles leave room for a real self to exist. They create patterns of guilt, obligation, emotional suppression that don't disappear with age. They follow a person into adulthood, into relationships, into every part of their identity. And when someone finally begins to step outside that role, when they try to exist as a whole person, not a function, the system reacts. It pushes back. It questions. It blames. Because in these environments, change is not welcomed. It's seen as disruption. The moment you stop playing your role is the moment you stop being predictable. And unpredictability feels like a threat. For many people, estrangement isn't about rejecting their family. It's about refusing to stay confined in a version of themselves that was slowly destroying them. Some wounds are visible, others are not. And often, it's the invisible ones that leave the deepest marks. Emotional neglect doesn't announce itself. It doesn't create dramatic memories or clear turning points. Instead, it exists in absence, in what was missing, the comfort that never came, the understanding that was never offered, the quiet moments where a child needed to be seen, and wasn't. There's no single moment you can point to and say, "This is where it all went wrong," because nothing happened. And that's exactly the problem. Growing up without emotional connection teaches a child something subtle, but incredibly powerful, that their inner world doesn't matter, or worse, that it's too much. So they adapt. They become self-sufficient, independent, resilient. From the outside, they may even seem strong, unaffected. But internally, there's often a quiet, persistent emptiness. A need that was never met, and never fully disappears. It's like returning to the same place over and over, hoping for a different outcome. Like going back to a well, believing that this time, there will be water. Maybe this time, they'll listen. Maybe this time, they'll understand. Maybe this time, they'll meet you where you've always been trying to meet them. But each time, it's the same result. Nothing. And eventually, something shifts. Because at some point, you realize that continuing to return to something empty comes at a cost. Not just disappointment, but self-abandonment. Most people don't walk away because of what was done to them. They walk away because of what was never there to begin with. Because hoping forever can become more painful than letting go. For many people, estrangement isn't about rejecting their family. It's about finally choosing to stop chasing a kind of love that was never truly there. Because the pain of what happened can eventually heal, but the pain of what never happened lingers in a different way. You're not just processing memories. You're grieving a childhood you never got to experience. A version of life that existed only in hope. If estrangement looks sudden from the outside, what's even harder to understand is why someone stayed for so long. Why endure years, sometimes decades, of emotional strain before finally stepping away. The answer lies in two powerful psychological forces: trauma bonding, and the cycle of hope. Trauma bonding doesn't come from constant pain. It comes from inconsistency, moments of hurt, followed by moments of warmth. A harsh comment, then an apology. Distance, then sudden affection. A boundary crossed, followed by promises to change. This emotional unpredictability creates confusion. Your mind starts trying to make sense of it. Your nervous system starts adapting to it. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to associate instability with love. You start believing that if you just try harder, be more patient, more understanding, more careful, you'll finally receive the version of love you've been waiting for. And that's where the cycle of hope takes hold. It keeps you invested. It keeps you forgiving. It keeps you returning, again and again, to the same patterns that slowly wear you down. Hope, in itself, isn't the problem. The problem is that the hope is placed in potential, in who someone could be, rather than who they consistently show themselves to be. Many people stay not because they're weak, but because they've been conditioned to believe that leaving is wrong. That distance equals betrayal. That self-protection is selfish. That wanting peace means you're the difficult one. So they adapt. They minimize their needs. They justify the behavior. They wait for a turning point that never arrives. And when they finally walk away, it's not because the love disappeared. It's because they finally saw the pattern clearly and understood it wasn't going to change, because staying didn't just hurt, it slowly erased them. Estrangement often begins with a quiet, devastating realization. If I stay, I will lose myself. When people hear the term no contact, they often imagine something extreme. A cold, final act of rejection. But distance is rarely about punishment. It's about survival. And it doesn't always happen all at once. For some, it starts with low contact, less frequent conversations, shorter visits, carefully chosen topics. It's not indifference. It's a boundary, a quiet way of saying, I still care, but I can't give you full access to me anymore. For others, there's the gray rock approach. They become neutral, steady, emotionally unresponsive, not because they've stopped feeling, but because reacting only fuels the same unhealthy patterns. It's not coldness, it's control, it's protection. And then, for some, after years of trying everything else, comes no contact, not out of anger, but out of necessity, because every softer boundary was ignored. Every attempt to fix things failed, and distance becomes the only remaining option to protect their mental and emotional well-being. But this decision is never simple. It carries grief, it carries guilt, and at the same time, it carries relief. You grieve the relationship you wished you had. You question whether you did the right thing. And yet, for the first time, you feel a sense of quiet, a sense of space. Distance isn't rejection. It's clarity. It's the moment someone accepts. I can't change you, but I can choose what I allow into my life. And for many, that choice, whether partial or complete, is the first time they truly feel safe. When someone creates distance from their family, people often assume the hardest part is the separation itself. But that's not where the deepest pain lies. The real weight comes afterward, in the grief that follows. This kind of grief is complicated. It's what psychologists call ambiguous loss. You're mourning someone who is still alive, still present in the world, still existing, just not in your life. There's no closure, no clear ending, no ritual to help you move forward. Just an open space, where answers should have been. You're not only grieving what was lost, you're grieving what never existed. The parent who might have understood you, the version of them who might have protected you, loved you fully, seen you clearly. Letting go of that imagined version can feel like losing them all over again. Then come the moments that make it heavier. Holidays that feel incomplete. Celebrations that carry silence. Rooms that feel different without certain people in them. From the outside, everything looks normal. But internally, you're carrying a kind of grief that's hard to explain, and even harder for others to understand. And yet, within that grief, there is also something unexpected. Relief. The tension is gone. The emotional chaos has stopped. Your body is no longer on constant alert. For the first time, your nervous system begins to settle. But even that relief can feel complicated, because it comes with guilt. As if choosing peace means you've done something wrong. As if protecting yourself is a form of betrayal. This is the hidden cost of freedom. Not just letting go of others, but learning to live with the weight of that choice. The hardest part isn't just the distance. It's the heartbreak of choosing your well-being over the people who shaped your past. It's not a simple decision. It's not a clean break. It's heavy, layered, and often filled with doubt. But for many, it becomes the only way to stop carrying pain that was never theirs to begin with. And healing begins in a quiet but powerful moment, when you realize you can grieve what you lost and still move forward toward the life you deserve. For many, estrangement isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a life they were never fully allowed to live. Because when the noise fades, and the constant tension disappears, something unexpected begins to surface. A sense of self. Not the version shaped by expectations. Not the one molded by survival. But something real. Something that was always there, just buried. Reclaiming that identity doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, uncomfortable at times, but deeply necessary. You begin asking yourself questions you were never given the space to explore. What do I actually want? What brings me peace? What feels right for me? And for the first time, your answers don't have to pass through fear. You stop shrinking yourself to fit expectations. You stop apologizing for simply existing. And gradually, you begin to trust your own voice again. The one that was ignored, dismissed, or silenced for years. Healing also carries something even more powerful. The decision to break the cycle. Many who walk away don't do it out of anger, but out of awareness. A quiet, firm realization. This pattern ends with me. They choose not to pass down the same emotional wounds, the same instability, the same conditional love. Instead, they begin something new. They learn to care for themselves with the gentleness they were once denied. And if they choose to have children, they offer them something different, something safer, something softer, something whole. And somewhere along this path, another shift begins to happen. You start to understand that family is not limited to where you came from. You discover what it means to build a family of choice. People who listen without dismissing you, who support without controlling you, who show up, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely want to. A partner who understands you, friends who feel like home, connections rooted in respect, honesty, and care, not tied together by history, but by intention, not forced, but chosen. And in that space, something finally feels different. You are seen, you are valued, you are safe. That's where the real shift happens. Not just when you leave what hurt you, but when you begin creating what heals you. Reclaiming your identity is courage. Building your own sense of family is freedom. And together, they become the foundation of a life, no longer defined by survival, but by possibility. In the end, estrangement isn't simply about breaking away. It's about redefining what family truly means. For some, family will always be the people who raised them. For others, it becomes the people who finally made them feel safe. And both truths can exist at the same time. Walking away doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you ungrateful. It means you stopped returning to something that was hurting you. It means you chose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, healing over repetition. And that choice, no matter how painful, is an act of profound courage. As you move forward, remember this. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to create a life that isn't shaped by your wounds, but by your choices. A life defined by the love you accept, the boundaries you honor, and the future you finally give yourself permission to live. And if this resonated with you, even in a small way, know this. You are not alone. There are countless others, walking this same quiet, complicated path. If you'd like to stay connected, consider subscribing. Here, we explore the deeper, often unspoken parts of the human experience, every week. And if you feel ready, share your thoughts or your story, because sometimes, your words can become the strength someone else is searching for. Take care of yourself. You deserve to heal.